I protected a creature that saved the governor's son from freezing to death in a blizzard, and what I discovered about Bigfoot's instinct to protect lost children changes everything we thought we knew about these beings. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 28 years, I've been a wildlife biologist specializing in large mammal behavior in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. This is a story I swore I'd never tell, a secret that cost me my career, my reputation, and nearly my life. But after what happened on February 14th, 2024, when a Bigfoot I've been studying for nearly 3 decades saved the life of Governor Mitchell's 8-year-old son during the worst blizzard in 70 years, I realized some truths are too important to keep hidden. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you believe about intelligence, compassion, and what it means to be human. Because what I learned in those frozen mountains wasn't just about a creature's instinct. It was about a bond that transcends species, about a tragedy that haunts an entire lineage, and about a choice that one magnificent being made that proves we've been looking at these creatures all wrong from the very beginning. The snow was already falling hard that morning when I received the emergency call from the National Forest Service. I was at my research cabin, a small structure I'd built deep in the wilderness, miles from any marked trail. The voice on the satellite phone was frantic, crackling through interference. Dr. Chun, we have a situation. The governor's son is missing. 8 years old. Last seen near Eagle Ridge Trail around 0900 hours. Search and rescue is mobilizing, but we need every available resource. The blizzard warning just upgraded to severe. Wind chill dropping to -40. We're running out of time. My blood went cold, and it wasn't from the temperature outside. Eagle Ridge Trail. That was less than 3 miles from where I'd last observed her. The Bigfoot I've been documenting since 1996. The matriarch I come to know as Aurora. The creature who taught me that everything mainstream science believed about Sasquatch was catastrophically wrong. I grabbed my emergency pack, my tracking equipment, and something I kept hidden in a locked case beneath my floor. A journal. 28 years of field observations. 28 years of documented evidence that would destroy my credibility if anyone ever saw it. 28 years of watching a species we claimed didn't exist demonstrate intelligence, culture, emotion, and something I'd witnessed only a handful of times. An instinct to protect human children that seemed to override every survival mechanism these beings possessed. The journey through the mounting storm was brutal. Wind tore through the trees like a living thing, furious and relentless. Snow fell so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The temperature was plummeting fast, and even with my decades of wilderness experience, I felt fear creeping into my chest. An 8-year-old child couldn't survive more than a few hours in these conditions, maybe less. I knew the terrain better than the search and rescue teams. I knew where the caves were, where the natural shelters formed between fallen timber and rock formations. But more importantly, I knew Aurora's territory. I knew her patterns, and I knew something the search teams didn't. If that child had wandered into her range, if she had detected his presence, there was a possibility. A slim, impossible possibility that went against every scientific principle I'd been trained to believe. But I'd seen it before. Once, 12 years ago. A situation so similar it made my hands shake as I pushed through the deepening snow. A situation that had shown me the truth about these creatures and the tragedy that drove their behavior. A truth I'd kept secret because revealing it would mean revealing Aurora's existence, which would mean her death. Because humans don't protect what they don't understand. They study it, they cage it, they destroy it. The memory came flooding back as I climbed the steep ridge, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It was March 2012. I'd been tracking Aurora for 16 years by then, documenting her movements, her behaviors, learning the complex vocalization she used. She was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, with russet color fur that had patches of silver around her face and shoulders. Her eyes were the color of dark amber, and they held an intelligence that was unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. I'd first encountered her by accident in 1996. I was conducting a routine wildlife survey when I found tracks, enormous tracks, 17 inches long, humanoid in shape, showing 5 distinct toes but no claw marks. The stride length was over 6 feet. My scientific training told me it was impossible. My eyes told me it was real. I followed those tracks for days, and eventually she let me find her, not by accident. She'd been watching me for weeks, I later realized, evaluating me, deciding whether I was a threat. When she finally revealed herself, standing at the edge of a clearing as twilight painted the sky purple and gold, I understood immediately that I was looking at something that would rewrite every biology textbook ever written. She didn't run. She didn't attack. She simply stood there, watching me with those impossibly intelligent eyes, and I knew in that moment my life had just changed forever. Over the years that followed, I built a relationship with Aurora that defied every scientific protocol. I left offerings, food, tools I'd crafted from natural materials, books, yes, books, because I discovered something extraordinary. Aurora could understand symbolic representation. She couldn't read in the traditional sense, but she could interpret images, recognize patterns, understand complex concepts through visual media. I tested this theory carefully, methodically, documenting everything. And what I learned was staggering. Aurora wasn't just an undiscovered primate. She was something else entirely. Something that shared far more with humans than our DNA alone could explain. But it was in March 2012 that I learned the deepest truth about her kind. The truth that explains so much about why they hid. Why they avoided human contact with such desperate determination. Why they seemed to haunt the edges of our world like ghosts who couldn't quite leave. I'd been following Aurora's trail through a section of forest near Granite Falls when I heard it. A child crying. Not a Bigfoot juvenile. A human child. My heart hammered as I moved toward the sound. And what I found made me stop breathing. A little girl, maybe 5 years old. Lost. Hypothermic. Barely conscious. She was sitting beneath a massive cedar tree. Her lips blue. Her skin pale as snow. And standing over her, sheltering her from the wind with her enormous body, was Aurora. The creature didn't run when she saw me. She made a low, resonant vocalization that I'd come to recognize as distress. She was trying to warm the child, but she didn't know what else to do. She'd found a lost human child, and every instinct in her being had compelled her to protect it. I approached slowly, carefully, speaking in low, calm tones. Aurora stepped back, allowing me access to the girl. I could see the conflict in her eyes. Fear of human contact, but also trust. Trust in me. Trust that I would help. I wrapped the child in my emergency thermal blanket, checked her vitals, administered first aid. She was alive, barely, but she would survive. I used my satellite phone to call for emergency medical extraction, giving coordinates that were deliberately vague about how I'd found her. When the helicopter finally arrived and took the girl to safety, I turned to find Aurora watching from the tree line. She made a sound then, a vocalization I'd never heard before, mournful, haunted, filled with a grief so profound it made my chest ache. And that's when she showed me, using gestures, using the drawing materials I'd left for her weeks before, using every method of communication we developed over 16 years. She showed me her story, the story of her species, the story of why a Bigfoot would risk exposure, risk death to save a human child. Aurora had had a child once, not recently. Decades ago, a juvenile female with fur the color of honey. Aurora showed me through drawings, through movements, through the kind of pantomime that only comes from desperate need to be understood. Her daughter had been curious, too curious. She wandered too close to human territory, and humans had found her. Aurora drew images of men with guns, images of her child trying to run, images of violence, images of her juvenile daughter falling, not killed immediately, wounded, crying. And here's where the story became unbearable. Aurora showed me how she'd hidden, terrified, as other humans approached. Different humans, not the hunters. These ones had tried to help. They'd found the wounded juvenile Bigfoot, and they'd tried to save her. But Aurora's daughter was too injured. She died in their arms. These humans, Aurora showed me, had wept. They'd been kind. They'd tried. And Aurora had watched it all from hiding, torn between her fear of humans and her desperate need to reach her dying child. She'd never forgotten those humans who tried to save her daughter. She'd never forgotten their kindness. And from that day forward, some instinct had been born in her, some deep, primal drive that transcended her fear. If she ever found a human child in danger, a child as vulnerable and helpless as her own daughter had been, she would protect it, even if it meant her own death, even if it meant exposure. Because somewhere in her magnificent, complex mind, protecting these children was how she kept her daughter's memory alive. It was how she honored the humans who tried to save what they'd loved. I'd kept that secret for 12 years. I'd documented it all in my private journals, but I'd told no one, because revealing Aurora's existence would mean her death. Scientists would want to study her, The government would want to contain her. Hunters would want to kill her for proof. She would never be free again. So I'd watched over her in silence, documenting her behaviors, learning her language, becoming the only human she trusted. And now, as I pushed through the blizzard toward Eagle Ridge Trail, I knew with absolute certainty what had happened to Governor Mitchell's son. Aurora had found him, and she was protecting him. I just had to reach them before the search teams did. Because if they found a Bigfoot sheltering a human child, they wouldn't understand. They'd see a monster threatening a boy. They'd react with fear, with weapons. And Aurora, who'd spent her entire life hiding from humans, who'd watched her own child die because she'd ventured too close to our world, would finally be discovered. And it would kill her, not just physically. It would kill everything she was, everything she represented. The last living memory of a daughter who died in the arms of strangers. The wind howled like something alive and furious as I climbed higher into mountains. My GPS was barely functional to the storm interference, but I didn't need it. I knew where Aurora would take a child in these conditions. There was a cave system about 2 miles northeast of Eagle Ridge Trail. Deep, sheltered. Aurora had shown it to me years ago, one of her safe places. One of the locations where her kind had hidden for generations, leaving behind evidence of their presence that archaeologists would dismiss as natural formations or misidentified bear dens. I moved as fast as the terrain and weather allowed, my mind racing through scenarios. How would I explain finding the governor's son in a remote cave? How would I protect Aurora if search teams followed me? How could I possibly make anyone understand what I was about to reveal? The truth was I couldn't. I'd have to lie. I'd have to create a story that made sense without mentioning the most important part, without mentioning the magnificent being who'd risked everything to save a child she'd never met, a child whose species had killed her own daughter, a child she protected anyway, because that's what love does. It transcends reason. It transcends fear. It transcends even death itself. I found in the cave just as the sun was setting, though you couldn't tell through the wall of white that had become the world. The entrance was partially hidden by snow and ice, but I'd been there before. I knew what to look for. Inside, the temperature was still brutally cold, but the cave blocked the wind. And there, in the deepest chamber, I found them. The boy was wrapped in something that made my breath catch. Aurora's own fur, not torn from her body, but carefully shed over what must have been months, collected and woven into a crude but effective blanket. The child was unconscious, but breathing. His core temperature was low, but not critical. He would survive. And standing over him, her massive body radiating heat, her amber eyes watching the cave entrance with the fierce protectiveness of a mother guarding her young, was Aurora. She saw me and made a soft sound. Relief, recognition, trust. I approached slowly, speaking to her in the low, rhythmic tones we developed over decades. It's okay. I'm here. He's safe. You saved him. You saved his life. Aurora made a complex series of vocalizations, her massive hands moving in gestures I'd learned to interpret. She was asking me questions. Would I take the child to safety? Would I protect her secret? Would I keep her hidden? I knelt beside the boy, checking his vitals, wrapping him in my emergency blankets, preparing him for transport. And as I worked, I explained to Aurora what would happen next. I would take the child. I would say I found him alone in the cave. I would never mention her. Never reveal her existence. She would remain a ghost, a legend, a story people told but never proved. Aurora watched me work, and in her eyes I saw something that broke my heart. Gratitude, but also resignation. She knew this might be the last time we'd see each other. The search for the governor's son had brought too many humans into her territory. Too much activity, too much risk. She would have to leave, move deeper into the wilderness, find new territory. Abandon the home range she'd occupied for decades, and we both knew that at her age, such a migration was dangerous, possibly fatal. I wanted to tell her to stay. I wanted to promise I'd protect her, but we both knew I couldn't. The world wasn't ready for the truth about her kind. Maybe it never would be. So instead, I did the only thing I could. I placed my hand over my heart, then extended it toward her. The gesture we developed years ago. Respect, gratitude, love. Aurora mirrored the gesture, her enormous hand over her chest, then reaching toward me. And then she did something she'd never done before. She touched me, just once. Her massive hand, so powerful it could break a tree trunk, so gentle it barely disturbed the air, rested on my shoulder for 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like a lifetime. 3 seconds that said everything words couldn't. Then she turned and walked deeper into the cave, disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow her whole. I carried the boy out of the mountains as the storm reached its peak. The journey down was a nightmare of wind and ice and blinding snow, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop, because if I didn't get him to the search team soon, if I didn't control the narrative of how he was found, someone might investigate. Someone might find evidence of Aurora, and I couldn't let that happen. I radioed my position when I was half a mile from the search perimeter. Within 15 minutes, I was surrounded by rescuers, by medical personnel, by National Forest Service officials, and by Governor Mitchell himself. The man was crying as he held his son, and through my exhaustion, I felt a strange, bitter satisfaction. Aurora had saved this child, this creature that his government would hunt and kill if they knew she existed, this being who understood love and lost more deeply than most humans ever would. She'd save his son, and he would never know. No one would ever know, except me. The questions came in a barrage. How did you find him? Where exactly was the cave? What condition was he in? How long had he been there? I answered with a story I'd prepared. I'd been searching on my own, using my knowledge of the terrain. I'd remembered the cave system from previous surveys. I'd found him wrapped in what appeared to be moss and dried grass, materials he must have gathered himself before succumbing to hypothermia. Nature's blanket. Lucky. So lucky. The officials accepted my explanation. Why wouldn't they? I was Dr. Sarachun. 28 years of wilderness research. Published papers on large mammal behavior. Respected in my field. I had no reason to lie. So they believed me. And the governor's son survived because they'd found him in time. Found him in time because I'd known where to look. Known because I'd spent 3 decades building a relationship with a being that science claimed didn't exist. Known because I'd learned to understand a creature whose capacity for compassion exceeded that of most humans I'd ever met. The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Dr. Chen saves governor's son in heroic blizzard rescue. Wildlife biologist knowledge leads to miracle recovery. Expert finds missing child in remote cave. I gave the minimum required interviews, deflecting credit, emphasizing the boy's own survival instincts, the luck of the cave's location, the speed of the emergency response. I said nothing about Aurora, nothing about the carefully woven blanket of shed fur, nothing about the body heat that had kept the child's core temperature just high enough to survive, nothing about the creature who'd risked everything to protect a member of the species that had killed her daughter. The governor tried to thank me personally. I accepted his gratitude with a hollow feeling in my chest, because the real hero was someone he could never thank, someone who was, at that very moment, fleeing deeper into the wilderness, abandoning her home, because saving his son had exposed her to too much risk. I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to tell him about Aurora, about her daughter, about the incredible, impossible compassion that had driven her to protect his child. But I didn't, because the truth would destroy her. So I kept silent, and the secret ate at me like a cancer. 3 weeks after the rescue, I returned to the cave. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains wrapped in pristine white. The search teams were gone. The media had moved on to other stories. I hiked alone, carrying supplies I knew Aurora would need if she'd stayed in the area. Dried fruits, smoked fish, medical supplies. The journal I'd been keeping for over 28 years. Because if something happened to me, someone needed to know the truth. Someone needed to understand what Aurora was, what her kind represented. The cave was empty, not just empty of Aurora, empty of everything. Every trace of her presence had been methodically removed. The fur blanket was gone. The marks where she'd rested were smoothed over. Even the scent that I'd learned to recognize as uniquely hers had faded. She'd left, completely. Finally, I sat in that empty cave and felt loss so profound it was physical. I'd spent 28 years building a relationship with the most extraordinary being I'd ever encountered, and now she was gone. Driven away because she'd done the right thing, because she'd saved a child, because her capacity for love had outweighed her instinct for self-preservation. I left the supplies anyway, hidden in a crevice deep in the cave, just in case, just in hope, and I left something else. A letter, written by hand, in the simple pictographic language Aurora and I had developed over decades. Thank you for showing me what it means to be truly human, not because of our species, but because of our capacity for compassion. You are not a monster. You are not a myth. You are proof that intelligence and love exist in forms we're only beginning to understand. I will protect your secret with my life. I will honor your memory by honoring your choice. And I will never stop hoping that somewhere in the deep wilderness where humans fear to go, you are safe, you are free, you are alive. I never saw Aurora again. I returned to that cave every month for 2 years, leaving supplies, leaving messages, hoping for some sign that she'd survived her migration. I found nothing. The wilderness had swallowed her whole, as it was always meant to, as she'd spent her entire life ensuring it would. But I kept researching, kept documenting, because Aurora had shown me something that changed my understanding of consciousness itself. She'd proven that the qualities we consider uniquely human, empathy, self-sacrifice, the ability to transcend trauma and choose compassion, these existed in a being that science claimed was either imaginary or merely animal. She demonstrated that intelligence and emotion could evolve on parallel tracks to our own. That love was not a human invention, but a universal principle that emerged wherever consciousness reached a certain complexity. And she'd done it all while remaining invisible, while protecting her species through secrecy and sacrifice, while honoring the memory of a child who died decades ago by saving children who would never know she existed. It was the most profound act of love I'd ever witnessed. And no one could ever know, no one except me, the keeper of a secret that would die when I died, unless I chose differently, unless I chose to honor Aurora's sacrifice by revealing the truth, even knowing what it might cost. That's why I'm telling this story now. 3 years after the rescue, Governor Mitchell's son is 11 years old, healthy, thriving, alive because a creature that humans claimed didn't exist decided his life was worth the risk of her own. I'm 52 years old. I've developed early-onset Parkinson's disease, a diagnosis that came 6 months ago. My time in the field is ending. My ability to protect Aurora's secret through active vigilance is fading. So I'm making a choice. The same choice Aurora made when she found a lost child in the blizzard. I'm choosing truth over safety, compassion over self-preservation. I'm revealing her existence because her story deserves to be told, because her sacrifice deserves to be honored, because the governor's son deserves to know who really saved his life, and because Aurora's daughter, who died in the arms of humans who tried to save her, deserves to be remembered, not as a cryptid, not as a monster, but as a child. A young being who wandered too close to a world that feared her kind, who was shot by those who didn't understand, and who was mourned by a mother who spent the rest of her life protecting the children of the species that had killed her own. This is not a Bigfoot story. This is a story about love, about the kind of love that transcends species, about the kind of love that forgives the unforgivable, about the kind of love that continues even after death, about the kind of love that makes a mother protect the children of her child's killers because somewhere in the vast complexity of her magnificent mind, she understood something we're only beginning to grasp. We are all connected. We are all capable of both terrible cruelty and extraordinary compassion. And the measure of intelligence is not in our tools or our technology. It's in our capacity to choose kindness even when fear and hatred would be easier. I don't know if Aurora is still alive. She would be in her 60s now, old for her kind based on the limited observations I'd made. She might have died during her migration. She might have found new territory, built a new life far from human contact. She might be watching from the shadows even now, as she always did, invisible, patient, waiting to see what we choose, waiting to see if we're worthy of the second chance she gave us when she saved that child in the blizzard. I hope she's alive. I hope she found peace. I hope she knows that at least one human understood. At least one human saw her for what she really was. Not a monster, not a myth, but a mother, a being of profound intelligence and deeper compassion. A creature who proved that the boundaries we draw between human and animal, between us and them, are illusions we maintain, because acknowledging the truth would force us to completely reimagine our place in the world. Aurora showed me that truth. She showed me that consciousness and compassion can evolve in forms we never imagined. That love is not unique to humanity, but is a universal force that emerges wherever beings reach the complexity required to understand loss, grief, and the choice to protect others despite personal cost. She showed me that we are not alone in our capacity for nobility. We are not unique in our ability to transcend instinct and choose altruism. We are one form of consciousness among many. And the sooner we accept that, the sooner we can begin to treat all forms of intelligence with the respect they deserve. This journal contains 28 years of observations, detailed documentation of Aurora's behaviors, her communication methods, her emotional responses, her cultural practices. It contains evidence that will challenge every assumption mainstream science holds about cognition, consciousness, and what separates humans from other beings. It contains proof that Bigfoot exists. But more importantly, it contains proof of something far more significant. Proof that intelligence and compassion are not human inventions. They are universal principles. And they exist in forms we spent centuries dismissing, ignoring, or trying to destroy. I'm releasing this journal to multiple scientific institutions simultaneously. Not because I expect them to believe me immediately, but because I know how science works. Slowly, carefully, with validation and replication. Some will dismiss my work as delusion. Some will accuse me of fraud. Some will claim I've fabricated evidence for attention or money. But some, the ones who look at the data without prejudice, who examine the observations with open minds, who understand that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, will see what I saw. They'll see the truth. And once that truth is out there, once the scientific community begins seriously investigating the possibility that an undiscovered hominid species exists in North America, once the data becomes impossible to ignore, maybe then we'll be ready. Maybe then we'll approach these beings not as curiosities to capture or monsters to fear, but as what they are, our relatives. Our cousins, beings who share this planet with us and who deserve the same respect, the same protection, the same fundamental rights that we claim for ourselves. To Governor Mitchell, if you're reading this, your son is alive because of Aurora. She found him in that cave. She kept him warm. She protected him until I could arrive. The blanket of moss and grass I described in my official report was actually her own shed fur, carefully collected and woven over months, perhaps years. She saved his life, and then she disappeared into the wilderness because saving him had exposed her to too much risk. You owe her a debt you can never repay, but you can honor it. You can use your position to protect the wilderness areas where her kind might still survive. You can advocate for conservation policies that preserve not just the forest, but the right of unknown species to exist undocumented and unmolested. You can ensure that if anyone ever does prove these beings exist, they're treated as sentient persons deserving of rights, not as animals to be studied or threats to be eliminated. That would be the real thanks. That would honor what Aurora did for your son. That would prove that her faith in humanity, her belief that we're capable of compassion despite our history, was not misplaced. To the scientific community, I know my claims will be met with skepticism. I understand the burden of proof required for extraordinary assertions. But I'm providing you with data, detailed, consistent, multi-year observations, photographic evidence that I've deliberately kept hidden for decades because I feared what would happen if Aurora's existence was confirmed. DNA samples that I've stored in conditions designed to preserve their integrity. Audio recordings of vocalizations that don't match any known North American primate. And I'm asking you not to rush to judgment, not to dismiss this work because it challenges your worldview, but to investigate, to examine, to consider the possibility that we've been wrong about what exists in the deep wilderness, that we've been wrong about the boundaries of consciousness, that we've been wrong about our uniqueness in the animal kingdom. Because if I'm right, if Aurora and her kind really do exist, then we're standing on the threshold of the most significant biological discovery in human history. And how we respond to that discovery will define us as a species. Will we choose fear and dominance, as we have so many times before? Will we choose to capture, study, exploit? Or will we choose differently? Will we choose to respect, to protect, to recognize that intelligence and compassion exist in forms we never imagined, and that our responsibility is not to control them but to coexist with them? I'm dying. The Parkinson's is progressing faster than my doctors expected. I have maybe 2 years before I'm unable to care for myself. Maybe less. I'm releasing this information now because I won't be able to protect Aurora's secret much longer. Because someone needs to know the truth. Because her story deserves to be told. And because that 8-year-old boy who survived a blizzard, because a creature that shouldn't exist decided he was worth saving, he deserves to know what really happened. He deserves to know about Aurora, about her daughter, about the incredible, impossible chain of events that led to a Bigfoot protecting a human child in a snow cave while the world searched frantically and found nothing. He deserves to understand that he was saved not by luck or coincidence, but by love, by a form of love so profound it transcended species, transcended fear, transcended every rational reason to stay hidden. That's the story I need to tell before I die. Not because I want fame or recognition, but because Aurora deserves to be remembered. Her daughter deserves to be remembered. And the truth deserves to be known, even if it destroys my reputation. even if it subjects me to ridicule, even if it accomplishes nothing except putting words to something I witnessed that changed my understanding of consciousness itself. I spent 28 years building a relationship with a being that humans claimed didn't exist. I watched her mourn. I watched her remember. I watched her make a choice to save a child whose species had killed her own daughter. And I understood, in that moment and every moment since, that we are not alone in our capacity for nobility. We are not unique in our ability to love beyond reason. We are one small part of a vast, interconnected web of consciousness that spans species and forms we haven't even begun to imagine. Aurora taught me that. She showed me that the qualities we prize most highly in ourselves, compassion, sacrifice, the ability to forgive and protect despite personal cost, these are not human inventions. They are universal principles that emerge wherever intelligence reaches sufficient complexity. They exist in the wolf protecting her pack, in the elephant mourning her dead, in the whale singing songs across ocean depths, and yes, in the Bigfoot sheltering a lost human child from a blizzard that would have killed him. We are not special because we possess these qualities. We are special because we have the capacity to recognize them in others, to honor them, to protect them. Aurora gave us that chance. She gave us proof that consciousness exists in forms we've dismissed and ignored. She gave us an opportunity to choose differently, to be better, to recognize our relatives in the wilderness, and extend to them the same rights we claim for ourselves. What we do with that opportunity will define our species for generations to come. Will we choose to learn, to grow, to expand our circle of compassion? Or will we choose to destroy what we don't understand, to cage what we fear, to prioritize our curiosity over their freedom? I hope we choose wisely. I hope Aurora's sacrifice wasn't in vain. I hope that somewhere in the deep forest where satellites can't penetrate and humans fear to wander, she's still alive, still free, still watching. And I hope that if we ever do confirm her kind's existence, we remember the story of the creature who saved the governor's son, who protected a child because somewhere in her magnificent mind, she decided that love was stronger than fear, that compassion was stronger than hatred, that the memory of her own daughter, who died in the arms of humans who tried to save her, was worth honoring through protection of other children, even human children, even the children of the species that had killed what she loved most. That's what Aurora taught me. That's the truth I'm sharing now. And that's the legacy I hope endures long after I'm gone. Not the scientific discovery, not the proof of an unknown species, but the deeper truth, the truth that love transcends boundaries we thought were absolute, that consciousness and compassion evolve wherever complexity allows, and that we share this world with beings of profound intelligence and deeper nobility than we ever imagined, beings who deserve our protection, our respect, our recognition as fellow travelers on this impossible, beautiful journey called life. Thank you, Aurora, for everything you taught me, for everything you showed me, for the sacrifice you made, for the child you saved, for the truth you embodied. I will honor your memory by honoring your choice, by protecting your story, by ensuring that when people remember the blizzard rescue of 2024, they remember not just a miracle of survival, but the being who made that miracle possible, the mother who never stopped loving, the creature who never stopped protecting, the soul who proved that humanity's greatest qualities exist far beyond the boundaries of our species. You are not forgotten. You will never be forgotten. And somewhere, I believe you know that, somewhere you're watching, somewhere you're safe, and somewhere in the vast mystery of consciousness that connects all living things, your daughter knows that her death was not in vain, that her mother honored her memory by saving others, by choosing compassion over fear, by proving that love, real love, never dies. It just changes form. It transcends species. It becomes eternal. That's what you taught me, Aurora. That's what I'm sharing with the world. And that's the truth that will endure long after we're both gone.